Yo, what's up, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another video. Today we're going to be talking about a team that has really kind of fallen off hard since the start of the season. Now, I made a video similar to this talking about the New York Knicks, a team that has really disappointed, but this is kind of a little bit of a different case. The Knicks were really good last season, and then coming into this year have kind of just disappointed over the course of the whole year, while this team has they start off really hot, and now they've fallen off dramatically, and that team is the Washington Wizards. Now, they had kind of a crazy offseason last year. They had Russell Westbrook, Bradley Beal kind of carrying that team, and they made the decision this offseason to kind of try and switch things up. They traded Russell Westbrook to the Lakers to improve their depth. They got Montrezl Harrell, Kyle Kuzma, KCP, three solid role players. They brought in Spencer Dinwiddie, and they kind of just revamped the roster to try and focus it around the strengths of their franchise cornerstone as they see him, Bradley Beal, who just made an All-NBA team, was just second in the NBA in scoring, and so it kind of looked like they did a pretty good job. Dinwiddie is a playmaker who can help out. He's not going to take too many shots from Bradley Beal. KCP and Kyle Kuzma are good 3-and-D wings, and Kyle Kuzma can play some 4. Montrezl Harrell gives them some bench scoring. It looked like they did a pretty good job of improving the roster around Bradley Beal, and that was especially the way it looked after the way that they started. In their first 12 games, they were 9-3. They were the first seed in the Eastern Conference. They were dominating teams, and it looked like their experiment had worked. Before the season, I said that this Wizards team was kind of an experiment in what matters more, star power or depth. And it looked like depth was winning. They were playing phenomenal basketball. Bradley Beal, despite struggling, they were still doing very well. And now they've plummeted. They've gone from 9-3 to 15-13. They are 6-10 in their last 16 games since that 12-game start, and they look horrible as of recently. Just last night, they got blown out by the Denver Nuggets. They can't seem to put points on the board, and it's a case of multiple different guys. But the guy that I really want to focus on to start the video, well, I'll move a little bit more into kind of some other issues that they have, is Bradley Beal. The guy that they formulated the whole team around. In the offseason, I said that it was time for the Wizards to make a big decision. They either needed to blow this thing up or just they would have to run it back and try and just make some smaller trades. They decided to run it back, they traded Russell Westbrook, and they tried to bring in depth. That was a cool decision. But now it's starting to look like blowing it up may have been the smarter move, or even now, it still is available. Blowing it up is still an option by the trade deadline. But the problem is, Bradley Beal's having his worst season since 2015. Like, he has been horrible compared to what he was last year. He's gone from averaging 31.3 points per game to 22.1. He's dropped off over 9 points. That's a ridiculous margin to drop off. And not only that, but he's shooting 27% from 3. That's the lowest of his career. The lowest of his career before that was last season, where he shot 35. So he's dropped off 8 percentage points from 3. He's averaging 9 less points per game. He's just struggling horribly offensively. He can't get any good looks. And even when he does get good looks, he's just not converting. He doesn't look like the same player he was last season or even the last 5-6 years of his career. This is his worst year since 2015. And back then, he was like in his third, fourth season. He's fallen off completely. And since he made All-NBA last season, the big problem is coming up this offseason, they've got a chance to give him a Supermax contract. And I guarantee he's going to ask for that. Because he made the All-NBA team, he's going to ask for the money. And even if this is his production over the course of the year, I'm sure he's still going to look at himself as a player of that value. And he doesn't look worthy of that at all. He doesn't look worthy of a max contract right now, never mind a supermax contract. And if the Wizards lock themselves into $200 million of Bradley Beal and he doesn't find his rhythm again, that becomes the worst contract in the NBA, bar none. And so this is a problem that's arisen, is not only is the team struggling right now because of Bradley Beal's inconsistent and honestly just really poor compared to his standards play, but it's going to hurt them going forward. The longer that Beal struggles like this, the more his trade value drops. And it looks like maybe in the offseason, they should have kind of just made the call to give up on this whole thing. He's supposed to be their franchise centerpiece, and his current output isn't going to cut it whatsoever. If he doesn't find form, this Wizards team is going to keep on sinking. He's supposed to be the guy that can take over, get them buckets, and be the guy that they can build around. They traded Russell Westbrook, a former MVP, a guy that they gave up their former franchise player in John Wall, to help Bradley Beal out. They traded for him, and then when that didn't work, they traded Russ again because they still believe in Beal that much. They traded him to improve that supporting cast, get some depth around a star, and that's typically a formula to be a pretty solid team. You get a star player, you put some depth around him, and it kind of works out. Even if you're not a championship team, you can still be a solid team. But it doesn't matter if you surround a star with depth if the star doesn't play like a star. It doesn't matter. At this point, with the way that he's playing, this Wizards team is just a bunch of solid players. No all-stars, just solid players. And that just doesn't cut it in the NBA. You can't have success without an all-star, and typically you can't win a championship without a superstar. They have neither of those things. So they're kind of just stuck. They're kind of a middle of the pack team. They feel like a play-in team at this point. And especially when not only is the star playing poorly, but some of those solid players that you brought in are also playing poorly. The main guy that I'm talking about is Spencer Dinwiddie. He has been so bad over the course of this recent stretch. To start off the season, in that first 12-game stretch where they went 9-3, he was averaging 17 points per game. That's really solid. He was shooting 37% from three, still only a little bit above 40% from the field, which isn't great, but his three-point ball was falling 17 points per game. That's pretty solid. He was also grabbing 5.5 rebounds and 6 assists. That's exactly what they needed him to do, and they were succeeding because he was doing what he needed to do. All they had to hope for was that Dinwiddie kept that up, Bradley Beal got out of his funk, and I think this team would have kind of started to rack up some wins. Maybe, I don't think they were going to maintain the 1 seed or anything like that, but they were going to continue to be a solid team. And since that 12-game stretch, he has been horrible. Not just by his standards, but by general standards. In the last 16 games since then, he's averaging 9 points per game, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, shooting 33% from the field and 27% from three. That's terrible for any player, never mind Spencer Dinwiddie, who was the big acquisition free agency-wise of their offseason. He was the guy that was supposed to come in and replace Russell Westbrook, potentially be a better fit alongside Bradley Beal, is what some people kind of looked at him as. Of course, Russell Westbrook is a much better player, but people thought, oh, maybe, less on-ball usage, maybe Bradley Beal can kind of be more of that main ball handler now, but he's been terrible in his last 16 games. He's not even looking for his own shot at all. He was shooting 14 times a game in those first 12 games. Since then, he's shooting 9 times a game. He had a game where he put up 0 points. That shouldn't be possible for the guy who's supposed to be your second option. The guy that came in and is supposed to be the guy that replaces a former MVP point guard. Obviously, Russ is not that MVP quite now, but he's an all-star caliber player. And so you brought in Dinwiddie to be that guy that could hopefully kind of fill in that role a little bit. Obviously, not going to give you quite the same production, but give you enough to help fill that gap and help the depth kind of work it out. He's supposed to be their playmaker. You can't have him averaging 4 assists per game over a 16-game stretch. There's no wonder they've been so bad. He's not looking for a shot at all. He's supposed to be their second scoring option, and he's not even playmaking, so he's really not doing anything out there. He's kind of just getting cardio at this point. Montrezl Harrell started the season off carrying them offensively. He was a big reason why they had that early success, averaging around 19-20 points per game. In his first 12 games, he averaged 18.3 on 65% shooting, which is incredible, and it put him at the front of the 6th Man of the Year conversations. And since then, he's averaging 12 points per game. 6 less points per game since that early 12-game stretch, which is once again a case of a player just dropping off in terms of production. He's not looking for a shot as much either because he's still shooting around 64%, similar to what he was shooting in those first 12 games. He's just not shooting as much. Then you throw in a guy like Davis Bertans, who is one of the worst contracts in the NBA. They're paying him $16 million a year to be a shooter, and he's shooting 30% from three. That's the only thing they needed him to do, was shoot threes and make them. That's all they asked for. And he can't do that. So they're paying $16 million that they could have used to improve this roster to just sit there, chuck threes and brick them so guys can grab the rebound. That's all he's doing right now. The second he got paid and got that big contract, he fell off dramatically. And now there are some games where he hardly even plays. There was a game the other day where he played like less than 5 minutes. There's some games where he plays like 11 minutes. And at one point, he was their starting power forward. Not this season, but recently, he was a guy that they looked at to be that floor spacer and help get them a lot of three-point buckets. And now he can't do that. So those are just some of the guys that are struggling. Some bright spots. KCP has been a solid 3-and-D wing. So is Kuzma, as I mentioned. Deni Avdija has a lot of potential as a defensive wing. But this team has a lot of holes. You can have solid 3-and-D wings all you want. Like I said, you can have solid players, but if you don't have a star or 2 stars, it's not going to matter in the long run. The Eastern Conference is stacked. There are so many good teams, and there are teams that have disappointed so far that I still think will find their rhythm, and I definitely see as better than this Wizards squad. The Hawks are an example of that. The Boston Celtics, I think, are an example of a team that's going to find their rhythm, and the Wizards are just going to fall behind if they can't figure this thing out. They're 24th in the league in scoring, and they have a guy who just came in second in the league in scoring. They're 17th in defense, so they don't do either thing particularly well, and they've been pretty healthy up to this point. We're seeing a lot of teams go through COVID protocols, go through a lot of injuries, and it hasn't even mattered. They've been healthy, and they still haven't used that to their advantage and gained ground in the Eastern Conference. They're around like the 7, 8, 9 seed right now. They feel like a play-in team. And if that's the case, just blow this thing up, because there's no point in being a playing team again. Beal's not getting younger and his trade value is dropping. You also risk losing him after this season. You don't want to lose him for nothing. I think the Wizards should take a long, hard look at this team, look at them at the trade deadline, and make a decision. Are you going to trade Beal, or are you going to give him that money? And if you're going to give him that money, then you need to do a better job improving this roster around him before the end of the season. They've got to make moves. Go all in. Trade picks, trade young players. Hopefully Rui Hachimura comes back soon. He's a guy that hasn't played this year, so maybe he could fix some of their scoring issues, because he looked like he had a lot of potential in their playoff run and in the Olympics playing for Japan. He played really, really well. He was scoring the ball very well, and it looks like he has a higher potential than he has shown so far in the NBA. So maybe he comes back and help. Or you deal him, you deal some other contracts and some picks, and you try and get another guy next to Bradley Beal and give this one last year. Maybe even 2 years if Bradley Beal figures this thing out. But if he doesn't figure this thing out, then the Wizards completely fumbled the bag, and this era has come to an end very quickly. This Wizards team isn't very good, and they're starting to show it. Let me know what you thought about this. I was hoping that the Wizards would be good. It's fun to see teams that kind of build their teams around depth, kind of, it shocked the world. I like Bradley Beal as a player, but to this point, he's been really bad, and I feel like he would be getting a lot more scrutinized if he wasn't playing in Washington. And if he was playing in like Philly or New York or LA especially, Beal would be getting torn apart. And right now, he's avoided criticism for the most part, but those criticisms are going to get louder and louder and louder as the season goes on. I still believe in Bradley Beal. I think he can come back and be the player that he has shown over the course of his career, but he's got to do it soon, or this season's going to be over. So those are my thoughts on Bradley Beal and the Washington Wizards. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. I appreciate y'all watching. I will see y'all later. Real one, say it back.